Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Today, I'm speaking with Marian Bacol-Uba. She is a holistic health and wellness expert, a transformational coach for trauma survivors, speaker, and author of an upcoming book called Survivor to Thriver. I was really excited to ask Marian about her experiences as an Asian American woman in business. She's actually Filipino and speaks several dialects fluently, and even a little Mandarin, I hear. You see, she has a background in marketing, real estate, and for being a well-known foodie, but more recently has rocked the world with her transparency about her childhood sexual abuse and the underbelly of stigma around race and trauma. Marian is also a certified Pranayama and meditation teacher and loves creating what she calls conscious content on her Thriver Lifestyle podcast and Mondays with Marian YouTube channel. Her mission is to empower others to transform past trauma into triumphs and rediscover their own powers to heal themselves from the inside out. So without further ado, here's my interview with the one, the only, the ever incomparable Marian Bacol-Uba. Hey, Marian.
Hi, Tamara.
Welcome to the show, love.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am really excited. I actually think you are the first Asian American I've had on.
Yay! I'm so excited. Thank you. That actually means a lot because, we were just talking about podcasting and sort of the work that we do. I just don't see a lot of Asian Americans in general. And we can talk about that. I think it's a really huge cultural thing.
Yeah, I actually really do want to. That's why I brought it up first, because you are a minority of a minority. You're female and you're Asian. And then, you're Filipino. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So not a whole lot of Filipinos, represented.
Not at all.
In the culture and in the media, especially for, women in power.
No, definitely not at all. And that's very evident with all the things that we see. When people think of Asian Americans, they think automatically of a lot of the East.
Yeah, Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean.
And a big thing is because, and I'll get into it with my story, is that we're not really encouraged to, be entrepreneurial. And my culture is it's a very warm and loving culture. They're all about singing and dancing and family, but they're also very practical. My parents were always there. They were all in the medical field. That's all really they know, you either become a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, it's very straight. You do this, that, and there's a pattern and that's it. And that's safe.
Right.
So taking risks is not, and encouraged to be an entrepreneur is something that's not very common. And definitely the outlier in my family.
I can relate to that. Yes. I love it. I actually have a Facebook page called Tales from a Trapezoid, and it's really dedicated to all of us who feel like, a trapezoid in a world full of circles. And so you are a little, a bitty Asian trapezoid in your family.
And I found my fellow trapezoid with you. So
yes.
That's what I love.
Yes. Now I hear you actually speak several different dialects.
Yes, I do. I speak 2 Filipino languages. So Tagalog is the main one. And then Visayan is the second most spoken language. And I say language because they're actually very different. So they're how Mandarin and Cantonese are actually very different languages, the same thing. So Tagalog is like Mandarin, it's the national language, and Cantonese is it's the second most spoken one in China, and Visayan is too. So I know both of those. And
see, I actually learned, I was just about to bring that up, and I actually learned a little bit about that from you because I only ever grew up, we had a couple of Filipino friends and they spoke Tagalog. I didn't even know there was another dialect.
Oh, there's hundreds. There's so many because there's so many islands in the Philippines.
Right, right. And so how cool that you are multilingual. And I hear Mandarin's actually one of the hardest languages to learn. So I'm really impressed over here.
but it's also easy to forget. I forgot a lot because it was great. So I studied it in college and 2 years, and then I actually studied abroad in Singapore and in Shanghai for language immersion programs. And when you're there and, you're studying and you're speaking, you're surrounded by it. It was good. And then the moment you come back and you don't practice, it's like, whoop, gone.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about, what it was like growing up in what I would consider, as a therapist, to be a very cooperative culture. The Asian community, you're right, doesn't seem to, really foster this big sense of independence and risk taking, and for great reason. And so I think reading some of your website, that seems to have played a big part in some of that inner conflict for you.
Definitely. I think it played a huge part. And I talk about something called family guilt. I originally talked about that on my podcast because it's very strong. So, there's a flip side to it. So it's all about Asian culture, and especially Filipino culture. They're very into family. It's the family over everything. It's about respect. It's about not shaming the family. It's not shaming the elders. And sometimes it goes to the extreme, to the expense of the individual. And that's really what happened with me. I went through childhood sexual abuse, and I had actually tried to tell someone in my family. I actually tried to tell my mom, and she didn't believe me. She's like, let's never speak of this. It's more like, nope, that doesn't happen. Not at all. So you're raised to everything is right. Everything is going well. Don't show any sign of weakness. And you just get really good grades, you excel, and, that's it. And you don't really talk about your emotions or anything else.
Yeah. And so, really what I have seen is that regardless of what culture you grow up in, and we're all trying to find that sweet, optimal spot because, oftentimes in Western culture, we have the exact opposite, where it's independence at the sacrifice of everyone around them.
Yeah.
And you grew up on the flip side of that, where the individual was sacrificed on the family altar, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so, you came out public on your blog about a year ago now regarding the child sexual. Was it 2 years ago? Woo!
Yeah.
Time flies for those of us who didn't write about it. I know what the vulnerability hangover is like. So what made you decide that it was finally time? Because that had to be a big moment for you.
It was huge. It was huge. And actually, that's what kept me back for so long, for so many years. The reason why I didn't confront it even with myself, I was in denial. I still spoke to my abuser. It was like pretending like everything was okay. I felt like I lived a double life. And that, I kept a lot of those, the resentment, the pain, the shame, all of it in, and it manifested in very destructive, toxic behaviors for myself. A lot of PTSD, suicidal thoughts, depression. I binge drank and did drugs to numb the pain. And I didn't think there was anything wrong. I thought, this is how you cope, and this is how you just, you move on. This is part of life. Don't show any weakness. As long as no one else knows, you're fine. And that caught up with me. When I was 28, I had an overdose, and I had the craziest out-of-body near-death experience that completely woke me up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Can you describe a little bit more for us what that moment was like for you?
Yeah, I vividly remember it, all the details, because this was at a very, very low point in my life for me. That same year, because I had jumped into entrepreneurship at that time, I was trying to save on money, so I had to move back into my parents' house, and that was the house where obviously a lot of, I still saw my abuser, and the memories were all there. And then my niece and my nephew, who are all both under the age of 1, they passed away within a week of each other. And so that was a heavy blow. And just, I was partying with friends, and it was to that point where I was just like I didn't really care. But let's just see how like pushing yourself. And I OD'd, and I literally came out of my body. I saw myself, I hovered over myself, and I saw myself go into seizure. I saw what would have happened if I didn't come back. I saw them call the ambulance, put me in a body bag. I went to my own funeral. And then, I saw all of this, vividly remember it. And I was given a choice by whatever you believe in, God, the universe, I was given a choice. And from this undescribable bliss of it's okay, you can come home, to if you want to come back, it's also okay. And I just felt that I wasn't ready yet and it wasn't my time. So I came back into my body like right before they called the ambulance. And, after that experience, I was like, I need to do something drastic or else I would go back into the downward spiral. And so I bought a one-way ticket and I moved to Miami. So I moved halfway across the country.
Yeah, almost the exact opposite corner, LA to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Why Miami?
Miami's always called to me. I'd been here a few times, but a recent time that I had gone, I saw another side of it. I just felt the energy of the water and it just felt right. I don't know. People ask what, I'm like, it just felt right. And I really went with my gut.
I love that. You followed your intuition.
I did. And people thought I was crazy because I didn't have a job plan. I barely had any savings. I didn't really know anyone. Starting from scratch, it was a huge risk, but I knew that if I stayed, it would have been worse for me. Even though no one else knew, I just knew it. So I took that leap of faith, and it definitely smacked me right in the face. It humbled me, from
for sure.
In LA where I knew everyone, I had a great career, I had connections, I had that safety net to nothing. So I really had to crawl my way back up. And the beautiful thing about it is because I was away from everything, I had no choice. So I had to do whatever it took, and I had to go inward. And that's really where I found meditation, where I found holistic healing. I started going inward because my whole life I had looked for external sources to make me happy and to heal me. Whether it was work or sex or drugs or alcohol or other people, I was forced to go within and to do something different. So that's where my journey went.
That really makes so much sense. And thank you for normalizing that for so many other women. I mean, we know from and men, statistically, it's almost 1 in 2 now, anywhere from 1 in 2.5 to 1 in 4. You can't really have 2.5 people, right? So that's a lot of people. And so when the brain goes through that intense trauma, and for you, your story wasn't just one and done, and as if that were at all minimizing it, of course not, but you were, abused over and over for years.
For 7 years, yeah.
Yes. And so of course the brain had to find a way to function with that. It's actually quite illogically logical to externalize it and to look for things to escape, drugs, sex, alcohol, anything to give me those feelings of happiness and security that I don't have. Or your innocence was stolen. Your sense of security, the place that you should have been the most comfortable, gone.
And you detach. So my whole life I had felt like, okay, it was okay to detach because detaching was actually safe.
Yeah.
So
it's a great way to describe that.
And so my healing journey has really been me coming back into my body and feeling my body and like discovering it and honoring it, because for the longest time, being in my body was always, then you would cry when I was told, not to cry, not to feel emotion. So I was like, okay, since I can't do that, then let me find another way. And it's been this like merging of, my spirit and my mind and my body together.
Yes, reintegration. And how fascinating that it took an out-of-body experience to snap you back in and go, oh, okay, sister, that wasn't the answer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly.
So if you'll allow me, I have another question about that. When you were out of your body in that moment, what did that feel like for you? Do you believe that some healing was already taking place?
I do. Even if I didn't know it then, in hindsight, absolutely, because it gave me the sense of that we aren't just our bodies. There was so much more, and there's a bigger purpose, and there's a bigger world, and there's something outside of us, that ties everything in. Because when I was in that space, I felt everything, everyone, there's no questions. It was the most absolute feeling of bliss and oneness and love.
Right. And that's so consistent with everyone else who's had a near-death experience. And so not to ever glamorize, wanting to hit the reset button in that way, it does sound almost as if your story mirrors a lot of others that I've heard, where it's almost like you did energetically hit the reset button. on your trauma, your body, the integration, all of that. Would you say that that you left some of the trauma behind in that moment, that was started the process for you?
I believe so, because it was a reminder, things that we all are supposed to know. We know as children that there's, love and oneness is the ultimate answer.
Mm-hmm.
We forget all that in our conditioning, so through that experience, it taught me that, I have a bigger purpose here, and this is something more than me, and I am more than what had happened.
Yeah. And so that word purpose, such a wonderfully energy infused word that I can't get enough of. It really, to me, speaks to the heart of your passion now for living consciously. What do you mean by that? What does it mean to live consciously?
To me, living consciously is to be aware of what you're doing. I feel for the most part, and I was like this for most of my life, you're just like a zombie, like a machine. You're really half asleep. You
just going through the motions.
Go into the motions, not really a lot of, it's all a blur. To really ask me, most of my life was all a blur. And now being awake and conscious, I see things now it's like this vantage point where, when our eyes are closed, we only see sort of a small little circle and we think that this is our reality. But when you're taken out and when you wake up, you really see that there's such a bigger picture, and that what we do has ripple effects to everything, and our choices, our conscious choices, has an effect to everything and to everyone. So going from like how you live, how you think affects, your world, your reality, how you interact with people, your energy, everything. When you're conscious about that, that means that and you're aware that what you do matters and that you matter.
Right. So I can already hear some naysayers and skeptics, Marianne, that I'm sure you have heard of, like, why are you making such a big deal about this? What's the, big deal about being conscious of what I'm doing or not? And rather than just supposedly, and I know that's not to be true, going with the flow. Can you talk to why it is so key? What is living consciously free us up from, or what benefits does it bring us?
I feel living consciously actually gets you into the flow of the universe, of life, because you know where it's taking you, and you're able to adapt and listen to your intuition and not feel like you have to control everything. So conscious, you're aware of it, and sort of life unfolds in front of you and you can really see it for what it is instead of always reacting.
Yeah, I love that it's choice over reaction, isn't it?
Yeah. So when something happens, you can take a step back and be like, okay, instead of why did this happen to me? And I actually write this about in my book that's coming out later on this year, 3 different states of consciousness and state of mind. There's victim consciousness, survivor consciousness, and thriver consciousness. And most people stay within victim and survivor because, they just have this limited vantage point. Whereas in the last one, you can take a step back and be like, okay, why did this happen? What is this trying to teach me? What can I learn from this? Instead of, why did this happen to me? Why does this always happen? That type of mentality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That has definitely been my experience in my private practice as well, that, sometimes people with trauma, they understandably need to be in that victim stage for a while, because that's where we first learn this wasn't my fault. To be the victim of something means it was against my will or desire. And then a lot of them do eventually get to that survivor space where they're like, okay, that's no longer going to define who I am. I have survived this. And this also applies to any other trauma, breast cancer, poverty, racism, you name it. But you're so right that moving to that next stage, and there's a lot of men and women out there that were like, that wasn't enough. I want to get back to the place where thriving, that's really on my own terms now.
Absolutely. And you spoke about how there's naysayers saying like, what is being conscious? What's the importance of it? I think if everyone realized that their choices matter and that they matter, like that adds to collective consciousness, into the collective. And I tell people, this is like you're in an empty room and there's one person whispering. You're on the other side, you won't hear it. But if there's hundreds of people whispering, it adds to the collective and it's loud. right? And so that collective is loud, and, that moves change, and that does something, but that needs every single person to realize that their one voice and their one choice matters.
Right. And it's so funny to me sometimes to be reminded of, I have to warn people that, mindfulness is a little bit of a mind fuck at times. There's
totally.
a little bit of a bitch slap in it. And that once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you become conscious, boo-boo, don't ever expect that you're going to be able to just close your, the doors, the blinds, and turn your eye away from it again.
That's when the universe tests us the most, and it is a practice, and it's a practice of living life and realizing that we always have a choice at every moment.
Yeah. And so I can see this already in just the stark contrast between your before and after, even on the very basic levels of, you went from marketing and real estate and being a foodie to now being this holistic health and wellness expert and transformational coach. Once you left your body, it's almost like you weren't going back to the same old. Yeah.
It just started feeling empty for me. The money was there, the title was there, but I didn't feel fulfilled or purposeful. I didn't feel, and not to knock it, because there's a lot of people who are good at it. If that's really what calls to you, absolutely you do it. But for me, it felt like I needed to do more. And there was just something inside me that thought, I need to share this, especially being an Asian American female, because there's no one really out there talking about these type of issues and speaking up. And I feel if I saw this growing up, maybe that would have made a difference, because I'd be like, oh, there's someone who understands my culture, who looks similar to me, who I can relate to.
Right. And see, I grew up in Japan. I spent a third of my life there as a military brat. Then I went back after high school to teach English for a year, trying to find myself. And I mean, the suicide rate among Asians is astronomical. And we can't help but wonder if, part of the reason of that is we're never allowed to show our pain, our discomfort.
Absolutely. And so you're told to internalize it.
Yeah, so for you as an Asian woman going public with her story of transformation and really, pouring a light on familial pain and abuse, it is huge.
And I had to be ready for it, because I had
about
family.
That process. What was that like?
So that process was actually, and this is why I always tell people, our family, as much as they're a big part of us and they're amazing, that's not your only choice. You can build your own tribe in the family.
Yes.
And that's really what I did. So I had a close group of amazing and supportive friends, also some family members who believed me, who supported me, and it said, no matter what, even if you come out with this, and I knew that I was going to have family members who would shame me, who would tell me, and they did. Afterwards, they're like, how can you put our family through this? You're a disgrace. You're disrespectful. You're really shaming us. Now people, you're airing out our dirty laundry, and people are talking about us. I had someone told me that I was doing it just for fame, and attention. And it was, like, this is your fault that our family is broken now. A lot of that. And because I had built a new foundation, when I was younger and I tried to do that, I didn't have anything else, that foundation to support me and root me. And so I crumbled. But now as an adult, before I went out, I found that my rock, my foundation, that I knew even if I got a lot of that type of talk and feedback, that I would be okay, because I knew that I had people that had my back. So,
not to mention all of the many, many women and men out there who need to hear from people just like you, and to be able to see themselves from the outside, from a different vantage point. And we know from psychology that we only truly learn from someone that we can relate to. And so we're just back again to see a female Asian American woman shining a light on living consciously and healing from childhood abuse is incredibly powerful. So thank you for your story on that.
Thank you.
So I have couple final questions for you. Talk to me about what spirituality now and the spiritual infusion for you has done for your life and your mission.
For me, it's been everything. It's really sort of been the coming back home, listening to my intuition, knowing that there is a bigger purpose for all of us, knowing that I am divinely guided, and we all are, as long as we use our muscle and our intuition is a muscle. If we don't use it, then it doesn't build and it doesn't get stronger. But the more we use it and the more we tune into it, the more we refine it, and it'll really, really guide us. I talk regularly to the source, divine, to I believe in angels and spirit guides, and I ascended masters. I talk to all that because we're not alone. And there are
Did you have inklings of that growing up before?
I did. I really did. And I think as children we all do when we're a clean slate, and we're so receptive and it's
very open.
And it's going back to that. A big part of my healing was healing my inner child and going back, and because I actually never felt that I had a childhood. Looking back, I felt like I grew up way too soon, and I don't really remember having a childhood. So a lot of it was healing my inner child and going back to that childhood, openness.
Right. And so your personal path has included certification in pranayama and meditation. Why did you choose those? Because
that's what really started for me. It was through meditation and silencing and going into really the void, that silence, and going back to myself inward was what opened up everything. It's when I got, it was through meditations where I did a lot of inner child healing. I went back in time to those times when I was a child and really needed my help, that I had no one, and I went back and
you were there for her.
I was there for her. I was there for her, and anytime something gets triggered, I go back to those places and through meditation.
I love that because it's always right there for you then.
Yeah. So I knew how powerful it was for me. So I know that that's what I want to share, because that really opened the doors for everything, because we all have this ability to go inward, but a lot of times we don't know it. We're not taught.
Very true. And how fascinating human beings are sometimes, that we're so afraid of going into the void. We're afraid of what's in there. It's dark. It's unknown. I've never done this before. And yet, hearing you describe it and everyone else who's done it, it's only by going into the void space, the divine feminine, that's where we find ourselves again. That's where we reconnect with source energy that is both without and within.
And once you tap into that, it's an unlimited source of power.
Yes, unlimited at your fingertips whenever you need it, like you said. Even I find myself at times, just a few moments in between each client, my therapy practice or online, taking a few deep breaths, sending some energy. I'm a Reiki master teacher, and just breathing in that prana again and feeling the life force that's all around us that we're connected to. Wonders in just as short as 3 breaths.
Just our breath. That's it. That's the key. That's why I delved into it more and got certified, because I knew how much it helped me. So I wanted to know more about it and how I could teach others to tap into that power.
Yeah. So if you'll allow me to turn the dial up just a moment, what do you find still trips you up here and there?
What still trips me up is recently, actually, it's the awareness, right?
Yeah.
So we get caught up with we're so human. We get caught up with life. So it's that when the moment that it clicks, your awareness clicks back in, and you're like, oh, yeah. And it's, and it's knowing that there's so many layers to it. We're never done healing because we're still alive. So even parts
if reincarnation's a thing, perhaps we still come back and work on a new lesson. Yes.
And speaking of reincarnation, I get a lot of dreams. And so I'm clairsentient, and so I feel a lot, and
yes,
I get a lot of dreams. And parts of my dream, even before I spoke publicly, was that in a past life, the same thing happened to me, and I committed suicide.
Wow.
And I didn't learn my lesson or fulfill my purpose, so I went back into another life. Something similar also happened to me, and I didn't commit suicide, but I lived my life, and I just kept that in, and I died of old age.
Right.
And then in this life, I was presented with a very similar situation, and this was my choice. I needed to face it.
Bumps. Yes. Yes, lady. Yes.
Yeah.
So it really feels like we heal in all directions when we take our pain and we take our lesson and then we use it to empower others around us. There's just no greater gift to yourself and humanity, regardless of what your pain is, because each of us has pain and it may look very different from the man or woman next to you. But you take what you've learned and you use it to be of service. It's just, and which then adds, it's like this crazy combined healing effect for everyone, including you.
Yeah. And when you truly start healing yourself, you're able to have more capacity to hold space for others to heal. And it's beautiful. It is a gift that keeps giving, once you start realizing that it's all part of our human experience, to feel this pain and to let it flow through us, not hold it in.
Absolutely. And, recent science is even showing epigenetically that we're actually changing our gene coding. And then if we choose to have children, they're no longer presenting with the same traumatic gene sequence that we had. It's just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
To realize that power that we have if you're willing to go into the void and not just distract yourself from it and distance yourself from it.
Ancestral trauma and wounds are real. And I felt that, a lot of what I'm doing, especially in Asian culture where women are told to, take a lot of this pain. And women in general, we've been told that we need to keep quiet and we need to internalize our pain and we can't speak out. But with everyone that's being, in this paradigm right now, in this time and space, we're here to break that cycle.
Absolutely. There's a big awakening going on, and a lot of the world's wisdom cultures are pointing to that. So one final question for you, my dear. What do you find most sacred right now?
Myself.
I somehow knew you were going to say that.
Myself. And it's a new thing for me. It really is. And it's coming back into myself and realizing and honoring myself, respecting myself in everything that I do, from the foods that I eat to the things that I think to the actions that I have. It's, knowing that I am sacred. And the more I realize that and delve into it, the better I show up for everyone else.
Yes. And it almost, I've noticed, makes the decisions for you. When you remind yourself that we are sacred, we're a sacred vessel, whatever wording works for you, you almost don't want to be around things that are negative. You don't want to put things in your body that are toxic. You just, for anyone who's feels that internal fight, this kind of clears up a big chunk of that when we could just, but the key is to stay woke, as you say, to stay as mindful as possible, moment by moment, that, my dear, you are a sacred temple.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So when do you think this book, Survivor to Thriver, might be available?
By the end of this year.
Yes.
It's been an intense process writing it, and there's just been so much. I mean, I'm continuously learning, so there's new things happening in the so it's broken up into two sections. The Thriver part is that talks about what happened and my journey, and the Survivor part, and then the Thriver part is really what I did to heal and continue to do, how you continue to thrive. And it's a state of being. It's not, it's not something that, I'm thriving now. It's something that you live and you are for the rest of your life if you choose to. So that's the book is coming out. Hopefully, I'm really aiming for it by the end of this year. And I'm actually launching a course that talks a lot about that pretty soon. So.
Fantastic. And I was just telling Marianne before the show that her YouTube channel and her website have so much valuable content. So you guys definitely need to check that out. And is that at marianbacol-uba.com? Am I remembering correctly?
Yep.
Sweet.
MarianBacol-Uba.com. Mm-hmm.
And I will have links to that in the show notes, so y'all can check that out later. Marian, thank you so much. This was such a joy.
Thank you. I feel like I could talk to you for just hours and hours. I mean, that's what you
compliment.
do.
Yes, that's why that's one of the best compliments ever.
It's so, this is not our first time meeting. It's just been so easy.
I agree.
Energetically and soulfully,
I agree. We might have to do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you, love. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.